Hi, I'm Linda Mechner, back again with Why Eating Healthy is Not Enough. I'm here with Dr. Lindsey Berkson, nutrition, gut, and hormone expert. And Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me. I am so gratified you're here. You have no idea.
Well,
And
I'm here in Austin, Texas, and I'm so glad to be here, y'all.
and I would love it if you would just start by maybe sharing your story of how you came to do the work you do.
Early on, which is many decades ago, nutrition just made sense to me. I heard a talk at a Theosophy Society meeting by Scott Nearing, who started the organic gardening movement. And he said that you are what you eat. So if what you eat is dynamic and energy producing, you'll have that more throughout your life than if you don't eat like that. So that made total sense to me. So since I was a teenager, I think I heard him speak when I was 16 or 17, I have been eating organically. My mother was an athlete. She was one of the first state champions in the United States in tennis in Illinois. So I've always been an athlete. So here I was doing what you're talking about, what the memo is today to most people. Eat well. If you eat well, you have a better chance of living younger, longer. But I kept getting ill. Eating well was not enough. I didn't just get ill with pre-diabetic issues or irritable bowel syndrome. I kept getting cancers. Now, everyone would look at me and say, if cancer is a call to change, people saw that I was a yoga teacher, I was doing detoxes, I was meditating, doing forgiveness, eating organically, and I was continuing to get cancers. So people said, if cancer is a call to change, looking at how you live, you should change to a diet of pure chocolate bonbons because whatever you're doing isn't working, right? Some people said to me, you should make a list of all the negative thoughts you have a day. You must be having too many negative thoughts, and make a list of your positive and negative thoughts. Maybe it's your negative thoughts. So everybody had an idea of why I was eating right, exercising in a healthy way, but I still kept getting cancers. So I was in the alternative health field when it was just starting, because it was delicious to me and organic nutrition made sense to me. So I went and got my master's in nutrition, which started my career. And then I went on to become a doctor and things like that. But I was starting to write a lot of health books. My very first book was the Foot Book on foot reflexology and nutrition. Harper Row published it. It sold 750,000 copies. But in the mid-90s, I read an article that there were pollutants in our environment that could act like hormones. And they were going to be attacking our hormones. And we were going to be seeing a lot more hormonal issues. Many of my cancers were hormone related. And I had horrific hormonal issues, even though by then I'd become a functional doc and was doing things right that we knew back then, I still wasn't getting well. In the research I started to do for a book I decided to do on these pollutants, I decided this was book worthy. So I ended up writing a book, one of the very first books on endocrine disrupting compounds, how our dirty environment could be sabotaging our best actions, even like eating right. While I was researching that book, the field of endocrine disruption was just evolving. It was just beginning in the mid-1990s. And the scientists took one compound as the model compound to expose pregnant animals to this compound and see if their offspring had health issues. This compound was the most powerful estrogen ever invented, interestingly enough, by the guy, Sir Charles Dobbs, that invented plastics, which is why plastics are estrogenic. So they would take this compound, expose it to a rodent that was pregnant, and they would watch the offspring. And the offspring developed all these health issues, and they were the exact same cancers I had, and the exact same hormonal problems I battled. Even though I did everything right, ate perfectly well, exercised, was a yoga teacher, meditated, had gratitude. It wasn't working. I thought, oh my God, this compound, by the way, was used as a model compound because it had also been given to pregnant women as a prenatal vitamin for 38 years. And many of the children born to those women, like the animals that were pregnant and exposed, had offspring that were damaged. Many of the children were known to have serious health issues. For example, like not being able to have children, which I had, and having cancers, which I had, and hormonal problems, like I had. So while I was writing this book and I bumped into that information, I thought, wow, I wonder if my mother was given that as a prenatal vitamin when she was pregnant with me.
And what was that vitamin?
It was called diethylstilbestrol. Its acronym, because that's really a long polysyllabic term, is called DES. D for deer, E for egg, S for Sam, DES. That stands for diethylstilbestrol. It was sold under many different names. It was manufactured by 365 different companies. It was such a huge product. It was given to pregnant women as a prenatal vitamin, or if they started to spot and their pregnancy looked like it was threatened, they were given this. So I wrote away from my mother's birth records, and I got them right before they shredded them because it was so many years prior that I was born. And I got them, and they arrived in my house in this big manila envelope, which I've kept like this. And I opened it up with shaking hands, and there was microfiche film, the way they save things in the olden days. There was my mother's birth records, and sure enough, she was given an injection of DES and given pills for DES in the beginning of her pregnancy. And then I realized that your exposures, especially when you're pregnant, but exposures have a lot to do with your health, not just the way you eat and how much you exercise. And
so it was your mother that got these injections, or her mother that got them?
no, it was my mother while she was pregnant with me.
With you. Okay.
The issue is in utero exposure, but actually the question you just asked is really great, because now some of the granddaughters born to the mothers that were the offspring of women who were given this when pregnant, so the grandbabies, were starting to develop ovarian cancer when they were 8, 9, and 10 years old. So what we're exposed to in the womb can affect our genes, and that can be passed on to the next generation. So this is a whole new way of looking at health. It's planetary health, because the planet is sick with lots of chemicals that act in a way like DES. Maybe they're not as strong as DES, which was eventually banned in 1971 as the most powerful cancer-causing substance ever invented, given to pregnant women in the early part of their pregnancy when the fetus is just having organogenesis. So that was the understanding that food and exercise aren't enough, and that your exposures, your environmental exposures, and what's the most important environment but the womb, but actually it starts before that. There's exposure to the egg and the sperm. So you can have exposures prior to even conception, because the egg and the sperm are mainly made of fat, and all these endocrine disrupting compounds love fat. Right. And then there's the womb. The placenta is basically made of fat, so they love to store in the placenta. And then they can be downloaded from the mother in breast milk, because breast milk is fat. So all of these exposures, I think, are contributing to the increase that we're seeing in childhood illnesses, childhood disease, in the autism spectrum, in many different issues. And sometimes it's not just what you eat. Sometimes it's what your mother ate. Sometimes it's what your grandmother ate. And sometimes it's what both of them were exposed to. Right. I met at one of the conferences. I went to many conferences for many years to learn about endocrine disruption. And I met Dr. Bloomberg, Bruce Bloomberg, and he has been showing how a lot of our obesity epidemic is due to chemicals that our mother was exposed to when she was pregnant with us. and they change the stem cells of your fat cells, so they're nastier fat cells. They stay bigger, larger, and they're not as easy to get rid of. So it's much harder in 2019 to lose weight than it was in 1980, because there have been a lot more chemicals introduced into the environment. And these are in the bodies of pregnant women, and then it can have epigenetic changes in the offspring. So this was totally enlightening. And that book came out that I wrote called Hormone Deception. Based on that book, I was invited to be a hormone scholar at an environmental estrogen think tank at Tulane Med School, and I got to work with all the scientists who created that field. And the field explains that there is it's called the fetal origin of adult disease, where you could be exposed to things in the womb or by the egg and the sperm, so prior to conception, and they can contribute to your health as an adult as you grow up, regardless of how perfect you eat, regardless of how perfect you exercise. But there are things I figured out a way, once I knew why I was ill, I figured out a way to fix it. And now I have not had to battle cancer for 20 years when I was having tumor after tumor after tumor, even though I was doing everything right.
Right. That was my next question is, so what did you do? How did you break out of that cycle of repeated cancers?
Well, I'm a rogue and a thinker, and I believe in being an agile thinker. On my radio show, I'm constantly encouraging my tribe to be an agile thinker, because I think our world today has us glorify, maybe it's always been like this, but you glorify experts who are supposed to give you a template of easy, quick answers to do to get yourself to the self that you want to be, without really having to think that much. But thinking is really how you get solutions. And so you need to know how to think. And if you know physiology and chemistry, which I love, 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 you can often, not always, figure out answers. So once I knew that the reason I kept getting cancers was because of this exposure to this drug, I dove into the research. I love to dive into research to find the theories of how DES cause cancer in the offspring. It's well known that DES offspring have a lot more cancers. And at the same cancers, the same years, it's reproducible because this drug creates certain damages. But turned out that the theory was that DES downregulated tumor suppressor genes, in particular, what's called P53 and Wnt7. There's genes that protect our back, because every now and then in our bodies throughout our day and life, we get cancer cells, but we have tumor suppressor cells that tamp down those cancer cells. So, and also that DES created one of the tumors I had. I lost a kidney and an adrenal gland because it created a molecule called galectin-3, an elevation of galectin-3 and an elevation of another molecule. I call them the molecules of mass destruction because they drive disease and damage. So now I figured out, well, I measured those molecules in myself, and they were skyrocket high. And I called up the researchers at Research Triangle Park that I had met previously that were doing a lot of the DES research. They said, oh, we've noticed for years that DES daughters have elevations in those molecules. We just didn't know what to do about it. So now I knew that I had damaged tumor suppressor genes and I had elevated nasty molecules. So I sleuthed the literature for what might reconstitute those tumor suppressor genes, and I bumped into a molecule that would do that, which wasn't a drug available. So I asked a doctor friend of mine to write a script for me, the first script ever written in the United States for a bioidentical metabolite of estrogen that has articles in the literature that it reboots P53 and Wnt7 tumor suppressor genes. And I searched the literature for what might bring down those nasty molecules. And I took the nutrients that brought the nasty molecules down, and I took the prescription, and I'm still on it, that brought the tumor suppressor genes up. And I did that 20 years ago, and knock on wood, I haven't had cancer since.
That is amazing. I mean, I'm just blown away by your story. Just blown away, and good on you that you just had the tenacity and the curiosity to figure out that answer. And so is this a repeatable thing? Have other people then gone ahead and tried this strategy?
there's a few people that come to me. I had written some articles in what's called the DES Action newsletter. So a few people came to me and they did try those and it was reproducible, but you really needed to get into the mainstream. So I called up, there are cohorts or groups of DES offspring that are still being monitored by the National Institute of Health, and they publish reports on their data. And I called up those scientists and I said, you know, you shouldn't just be looking at endpoint. They call them disease endpoints, like whether they're getting cancer or diabetes. I said, you should be measuring these molecules and you should be of mass destruction, and you should be, because they're what drive the disease, and you should be measuring these tumor suppressor genes. But there's no money around to really do much more research on DES. If you ask a lot of doctors today, a lot of young doctors have never even heard of it, even though it was a huge public health tragedy. So I think it's slow growing in the trenches. I have a radio show called Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio, and I did a show on molecules of mass destruction. In my own patients now, I specialize in cancer patients. I run these molecules on everybody because they run a lot of cancers, not just DES in utero-driven cancers. So in that way, I'm hoping to make little dents here and there, but I lecture a lot for doctors looking to become functional doctors. There's certain higher board certification programs, and off and on I mention it a little bit, but they mainly have topics they want you to lecture on. So it's not easy to get this information out there, but if you take any cancer patient and you measure these things, you have a better chance at helping them. They need all the help they can get to make their remission their mission. And they need a lot of, it's not just enough to get surgery and chemo and radiation. That just gets rid of the tumor load, but not even the stem cell tumor load, not the real, the cells that are going to give birth to possible recurrences. And now we know that hormonal therapies, a lot of doctors are trying to put women on tamoxifen for life, and hormonal therapies put a lot of the cancer cells into a sleeping mode. And as time marches forward, they wake up. So there's all these other things you have to do when you have cancer. You can't just say, oh, I got it all, I can go back to my life as it was before. And part of the work isn't just exercise and diet. It's this very smart, very agile thinking intervention that it's really hard to find a practitioner that thinks like this, because they say, well, take vitamin D, exercise, don't drink too much. The really basics, they're not enough to shore you up, to give you a better hope for a safer future.
Right. And I think as human beings, and I look at health in terms of, optimal health, whether it's cancer or weight or energy or fibromyalgia, it doesn't matter what the presenting challenge is, but we all have to be sleuths and figure out our particular situation. You can't go to a doctor and say, fix me. You have to be a collaborator. You have to be their partner in figuring out what your formula is.
But it's very hard to find a right doctor that, one, is not threatened by you wanting to take a powerful position in that collaboration. And also, doctors are paid to know what they're saying and fix people in 15 and 30-minute, if that, increments.
Right.
So, when you come in with this, it's very hard to find somebody to work with you like that, but it is happening more and more. Yeah. It is happening more and more, but it's not easy. I just had lunch the other day with my girlfriend who runs a clinic I worked at for 6 years called the Wiseman Family Practice Clinic. She's a nurse practitioner. And she says people are getting sicker and sicker, crazed and more crazed. Kids are coming in sicker and sicker, but there's things to do and ways to manage it. But even going to a functional doc, you got to find a really, really good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's so many approaches to health. There's, the completely allopathic, let's give you a medication, a surgery, approach to it. And then there's the, sort of the natural way, which is let's give you herbs and supplements and just, approach it that way. And then there's the, well, let's see why your body is doing what it's doing and try to get to the root cause. And, I'm sort of a root cause person. If you can figure out root cause, then you have the best chance of coming up with the right strategy, the right approach. But that takes digging, and it takes somebody who knows to help you. And it takes a lot of self-education too. I mean, if you weren't as knowledgeable as you were, you would have been powerless.
Well, you know, it's interesting, but even if you go to a doc that says they're looking for root cause,
Mm,
but when my girlfriend and I were chatting over lunch, she said many functional docs have the same hammer for the same nail. So they'll say, one doctor's practice will say, all of you have Lyme disease. The other doctor's practice will say, all of you have SIBO. The other, you know, people tend to see a nail, see patients' nails and have the same hammer. So what you really want, and which isn't easy to do, because once a doctor gets facile in a groove, they do, I think, start to see, I've got a girlfriend who's the North American expert in Lyme disease. She thinks everybody has Lyme. And I don't think the whole world has Lyme. And so it's very difficult today when you are a patient with a chronic complex illness to try and find an agile thinker who will look at you wide open and let your in-depth history and testing tell its own story, rather than them overlaying their bias without them meaning to. They're well-intentioned,
right.
without them overlaying their bias onto you. I mean, I chose not to do tamoxifen, for example, when I had breast cancer. I went to the University of Michigan. I graduated almost top of my class of 6,000. So I found out that the guy that invented tamoxifen went to the University of Michigan and went very close to the time I was there. So I called him up and I said, I'm a DES daughter. It looks to me like the tamoxifen molecule looks a lot like the DES molecule. I asked my breast cancer doctor, he wants me on tamoxifen, but they've never dealt with a DES daughter before. What do you think? Do you think I should take it? And he said, no one's ever asked me that before. I'm going to go think on it for a week. I'm going to call you back. So he called me back a week later and he said, you know, if I was you, I wouldn't take it. It just looks too much like the DES molecule. And I'm concerned that it would not be the good thing for you to do. So I never did tamoxifen. I had breast cancer 26 years ago. When I still go to breast cancer doctors, if I go to a new town or a new doc, they still yell at me that I did the wrong thing to not take tamoxifen. I go, I'm 26 years out, disease-free. And they give me this dirty, judgmental, nasty look because they see me as a nail and they have the tamoxifen hammer. I'm telling you, it is so hard to not be seen as a formula, as an algorithm. You have to fight your way, even in functional medicine. So what we do with our new docs in the programs is we try and reboot their desire to think and to give them a lot of physiology. Like I teach a lot on oxytocin, the love hormone now. But I talk on its physiology and its biochemistry, so then when they get a certain illness, they can think of all those things and kind of have fun with the application and see if it inserts, rather than to see everyone's oxytocin deficient. So you have to kind of reignite their delight with thinking, which by the time I think they graduate med school, they're all burned out.
Right.
Or even, you know, as a health coach, which we love our health coaches, it's so easy to fall into a rut. And then, you know, what can we do to help us see the patient brand new and not miss something so important?
You know, I think you are making so many fabulous points. And I hope our listeners really think on all these different points, because I think you're so right on. We all have to constantly be breaking away from what we think we know, so that we can be interpreting what we're actually seeing in an objective way. You know, we have to be objective, right, about what's going on with our bodies. And hopefully we also have objective support. And I could sit here and talk to you all day. I would love to do that. Oh my God, I've been so enjoying listening to you. But I know you have a free gift for our listeners, and I would love for you to tell us more about that.
Okay, well, one of the things that's really important is to get exposed to tremendously healthy food, but do it in a way that's tasty. I don't think food should be anything but hedonistically delicious. So I have created this flaxseed muffin recipe that everybody loves. It gives you many, many nutrients that reduce your risk of cancers. I've got all my cancer patients on it. And I also have a macadamia nut pudding that I use as frosting or as a pudding, which has a lot of data on it, a lot of randomized controlled, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies showing that it tamps down inflammatory genes. So it really helps us fight inflammation. And I put all this into a fun little ebook that people can have. I think that your audience might really enjoy that. So I eat at least a half of these muffins every day. And there's flaxseed and chia seed, and there's no sugar, and it's very delicious. And I thought that that might be a nice gift for your tribe.
It sounds fabulous. I would love a good flaxseed muffin recipe because I'm a non-sugar eater, and yeah, I'm gonna check it out for sure. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I can't tell you how grateful I am for you sharing all of this fabulous information and your incredible, inspiring story. I just thank you.
Well, thank you. And if people want to reach me to have me be part of their consulting team or put agile thinking, I'm available for one more year, I think only. I'm taking new patients, and then after that, I'll keep my old patients because I'm teaching more and more and writing more and more. But people can reach me at my website, drlindseyberkson.com, and sign up for my email list. And I actively post on Facebook at Dr. Lindsey Berkson on Facebook. And I try and give a lot of information out because in the last 2 years, being that I'm a lot older, I've had a lot older. I'm older than almost everybody everywhere I go.
You told me earlier, and I'm not going to say what you told, but I cannot believe it. Like, I almost fell out of my chair.
And so many of my friends are passing away, and we don't know how long that we have. And every decade is a brand new planet. It really is a brand new planet. And you don't know where that planet is going to circle and when it's going to implode or what your thing is. So I'm trying to share as much as I can. And I appreciate summits like you're holding where people get to be educated. They get to hear people they might never have heard. Maybe one little pearl that they heard will change a deep angst that they have inside. So thank you for doing what you do and inviting me to be here. I really do appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, it is absolutely my privilege and my honor to be able to put this together. And yeah, thank you again. And all right, we'll see you all on the next episode. See you all later.
Bye-bye.